my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. Today's episode is in partnership with Needed. There's overwhelming evidence that higher standards of nutrition support fertility, birth outcomes, and lifelong health. Unfortunately, the prenatal vitamin industry is failing us, leaving 95% of us depleted during one of the most nutritionally demanding times in our life. Most prenatal vitamins only provide bare minimum nutrition, while Needed goes beyond bare minimums with products that can meet the needs of our minds, bodies, and babies. I feel confident recommending Needed because their products are rigorously third-party tested and endorsed by over 10,000 women's health experts. Needed's prenatal multivitamin comes in two forms, capsules or a delicious vanilla powder. In addition to the prenatal multivitamin, Needed has created bundle options to meet your needs, not only during different stages of pregnancy, but also while trying to conceive and postpartum. As a mom of 3, I especially love their collagen, pre- and probiotics, and cognitive support supplements. Head over to thisisneeded.com to find your perfect bundle. I've talked to so many Birth Hour listeners who have discovered Needed through the podcast, and I love hearing the feedback that they are feeling better during pregnancy since starting with Needed. Use code BIRTHHOUR for 20% off your first order and up to 40% off monthly plans at thisisneeded.com. Since this discount applies to your first order only, I always recommend going with one of the plans for the best value. At the end of this episode, I talked to Ryan, co-founder of Needed, about Needed's recent clinical study results and what makes their products really stand out, so stay tuned for that conversation at the end of this episode. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Before we get to today's birth story, I want to talk a little bit about our online childbirth course. It's called Know Your Options, and this is the course you've been looking for if you just have that gut feeling that you know you should be taking a childbirth course, but maybe the one that's being offered to you by your care provider is not exactly what you're looking for. It might be more catered towards the type of birth they want you to have versus making you informed of all your different options and how to address different things that happen in birth, because as this podcast has shown us, birth is very unpredictable. So we would love to have you check out our 12-module course. You can go to thebirthhour.com/course to see detailed outlines of what is included in the course. You will also get a bonus course called Beyond the First Latch that is an additional 6 modules all about pumping, feeding your baby, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan. And we have a special coupon code for you. It's 100OFF for $100 off enrollment. Again, that's thebirthhour.com/course. Another great way to be part of the Birth Hour community is by supporting us over on Patreon. So by pledging your support each month at the $5 a month level, you can get access to all of our archived episodes, so over 800 additional episodes not in the main podcast feed, as well as our private Facebook group that has such a great backlog of information. Just using that search bar, you can get almost any question answered, and you're going to find really supportive people there that are going to become your friends. And in addition to that, we do monthly Zoom calls. Just go over to patreon.com/Birth Hour and become a Patreon member and come see what it's all about. It's just $5 a month. You can get an even bigger discount. If you want to do an annual membership, you'll see that option there. And there's also an option to get it as a gift. So if you have a friend or a mother-in-law or somebody asking you what they can get you to help you prepare for baby, maybe you want a Birth Hour Patreon membership so that you can listen to more and more birth stories and find great community. So again, head over to patreon.com/Birth Hour to get started with that. Today's birth story guest is Claire, and she is a repeat guest. I will link to her previous episode where she shared her experience having a birth center to hospital transfer that was a really positive experience. And today she is back to share her home birth story, which went exactly as planned. All right, let's hear from Claire. Hi, Claire. Welcome back to the Birth Hour. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Bryn. I'm so excited to be back and to share Everett's story.
Yeah, it's always fun to get a follow-up. You shared your first story, episode 629, back in 2021. So people can listen to that. We'll link to it. But do you want to just share a little bit about you and your family?
Of course, yeah. So I'm Claire de Leon. I live in California in Long Beach with my husband, Casey, our daughter, Octavia, whose birth story I shared before, and now our son Everett, who just turned 1 year old.
All right. So yeah, let's go ahead and start with finding out you're pregnant, pregnancy, wherever you want to start.
Okay. I actually found out I was pregnant at urgent care because I was so sick. I started having morning sickness really early, and I was like, oh my goodness, do I have the flu? I'm throwing up. I feel so tired. Like, what is going on? And it was right before Christmas. And I remember I just had this feeling of, if I have COVID, if I have, flu A or flu B, I really wanted to know and get tested so that I would know if it was fine for me to go to all the Christmas festivities. So it was kind of a funny circumstance in urgent care because, the doctor just said, like, could you be pregnant? I was like, well, I could be pregnant. So let's find out. And then obviously I felt really excited because of all the reasons to be feeling so sick. When you want to be pregnant, it's a good one, right? So
yeah.
And it was kind of sweet. It was right before Christmas, and the doctors in urgent care, I think, were more used to delivering like hard news about it's other kinds of sicknesses. So like several people came into the room and were like, "You're pregnant." I told them I'd be excited if I was. So
yeah,
it was very sweet.
Oh.
They gave me an IV, which was very kind. But yeah, I felt pretty sick right away. I think that was just running on empty, right before the holidays. I have a 3-year-old. It was just, I was kind of overexerting myself. And so it did kind of give me a reality check right away that I would need to make sure I was eating enough and staying hydrated and sleeping a lot and like really taking extra care, especially chasing after a toddler. But yeah, I came home and told my husband, like, oh, it's just morning sickness. And he kind of did a double take, like, wait, what? You're pregnant? So that was really sweet.
That's so fun. All right. So anything else from pregnancy? You want to talk a little bit about like the type of birth you were planning?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I'll say, because we have our 3-year-old, Octavia, at that point, she's 3. We were pregnant with her, and I had her over COVID. And so all of those like early appointments, going and hearing the heartbeat, the ultrasound, and all of that, my partner, my husband, Casey, wasn't able to come with me for her. And so we felt really excited for him to be able to come and hear the heartbeat and talk with the doctors, and just, for the appointments he was able to join. So I would say that first appointment we felt really excited for and kind of nervous, and it just felt like a really special moment. And we had kind of a first early experience in this pregnancy, or certainly he did, with feeling over medicalized by kind of the OB system and all of it. So, we went in really excited, and I had given him a heads up, like, it's a medical appointment. They're going to ask a ton of questions about my history. And sometimes it can be a little scary, like, this is a healthy pregnancy. It's going to be fine. The doctor came in, and there wasn't a lot of congratulations or anything like that, like kind of meeting our excitement. She started talking right away about all of the options for genetic testing that we'll have. I'm a little older. I'm over 35. And so in California, there are a lot of options for, do you want to be tested for all kinds of different things? And she started talking about risk profiles right away. And there isn't much or anything in our medical history to sort of put us in a category of high risk other than our age. But I saw like Casey's experience, and just, he kind of walked out of that doctor's office feeling like, oh my goodness, like, can we even be pregnant? This is nuts. Like, are we okay? And I had to kind of reassure him, like, it is okay. And, I knew enough to ask a lot of questions when my OB was, presenting, like, do you want to get tested for this? Do you want to get tested for that? How many genetic markers? Do you know what you would do if you had, these genetic outcomes kind of thing? And I just asked, like, do we need to make this decision now? And she said, no, the testing won't happen until closer to this many weeks. And I was like, okay, so just give us the information, and then we'll make the decision later, and all of that. So I think, I would say sort of right away, I was reminded why I had chosen a birth center initially for Octavia. I really wanted more like the midwifery model of care that would treat me as physiologically healthy from the pregnancy and look out for more markers that would put me outside of like typical healthy range for pregnancy. So if there are other things going on besides just the fact of being pregnant that made it, seem like I was presenting something wrong with me or the baby that was causing health issues. That's one thing. But just in general, to treat the baseline as like pregnancy is a healthy state. I missed that model of care kind of immediately. And I think that like early appointment kind of led me right away to remember, okay, I had wanted a birth center with Octavia. We ended up transferring. And although I loved the care at the hospital for our delivery, for prenatal appointments and prenatal care, I felt like I probably wanted something different. But I wasn't sure if I wanted to deliver at home or a birth center or the hospital. I really just sort of felt more like I wanted the experience of feeling, I'm sure what so many people want in their birth. I wanted to feel in control and healthy and powerful, respected. I just felt like I wanted the birth experience to set us off on this path of parenting this new person that we'd get to know and, be in relationship with for our whole lives, like just kind of set us off on a foot with them and with Everett and each other and our whole family in such a way that it was like we were doing this from a place of positivity and joy and power. So I was kind of open to lots of different models, but I felt like I knew what I wanted in an underlying way.
Like it would feel right when you met the right care provider kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. So what did you end up going with?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think that's actually what ended up happening was, so my husband really knew that he would feel safest if we were giving birth in a hospital. And he was pretty clear about that because of the experience we'd had transferring with Octavia and the care we had in the hospital. I think he was mostly worried about seeing me in pain, which I understand is just like, it's not what you want for your partner, right? To see them really and feel like they're suffering. And it was hard for him to see me in labor for so long with Octavia for that reason. The more I was listening to a lot of birth hour stories, I found myself like really leaning toward home birth and listening to home birth stories. And really, I sort of came to this realization that I wanted to feel powerful. And kind of what that meant to me was like, I wanted to feel like I wasn't looking for anyone else to come and do this for me, if that makes sense. It was like, I wanted to know that I was doing it. I was like wholly contained and that I was bringing this person into the world. And there's like some magic to it, like just that I wasn't wanting to be rescued or escape, the feeling, the process of birth, like I was going to kind of climb that mountain myself and have that journey. And I just felt like for me, being at home and knowing that I didn't have options to come at it another way, except for just, the way out is through like low intervention birth, it felt like it would be the safest place to do that. It also just honestly seemed like the most comfortable. And when I thought about a positive birth experience, the birth experience I wanted, like that's what I was thinking of. It's just kind of like even the feeling of getting into a car and going to the hospital, like that was one of my least favorite moments with the birth with Octavia. Was just the feeling of being in transportation was really unsettling and kind of like took me out of the work I was doing to be grounded. So essentially, I felt more and more like I was wanting to be at home and imagining this really positive birth at home and this powerful experience for me. And I was kind of trying to explain it and rationalize it, like why someone would want to run a marathon. It's just a feeling. It's just like, I want this challenge, this experience, this kind of somatic experience seemed cool and like fun and life affirming and joyful and powerful, right? So my partner, God bless him, is very supportive, but in this instance was like, you want to do this because it sounds fun? Like it's risky. And also it did not look fun last time. And, he just was he had this really other perspective. So I think I want to share just like a little bit about that and how we kind of came to that decision, because I think it really set us up well. And I was really proud for our partnership that we were honestly really able to sit down. I think we had childcare one day for our daughter. We went to lunch, just the two of us, and really talked about it and talked about our fears. And we both sort of agreed that this was a scenario that it didn't really make sense. It wasn't like one of us wanted to win the argument. Like we really genuinely wanted to come to a decision together, because we both agreed that for whatever scenario, if it were at home, if it were at a hospital, if something went sideways, if something went not how we anticipated or wanted or expected, if it caused trauma or worst case scenario, like real danger, it would be so painful for our relationship if it felt like, oh, well, that was Claire's choice or that was Casey's choice. We didn't want to plant that seed. So yeah, we just really talked. I shared with him a lot of the evidence-based birth, kind of really nice fact sheet on home birth and, for low risk kind of health profiles like me or like healthy expectant moms, that the risk is so low and what interventions can look like in the hospital system. And, we had watched The Business of Being Born with Octavia, and we listened to the birth hour with the evidence-based birth story on home birth, especially as being like an RN or being in the medical field, like even then what it meant for her to give birth at home. And so that was really helpful. And he talked with a couple of other partners, like dads of friends of ours who they had given birth at home. And one of our friends who was sort of like, he had not been on board initially, but he really learned more. And then they had their daughter at home, their first daughter, and were getting ready to have their second baby at home. And I think it helped Casey to hear from him on kind of his perspective. So yeah. And then ultimately we interviewed a bunch of midwives, doulas. We interviewed midwives who would do prenatal care, but then deliver at a hospital. Like, we're really kind of open, just trying to see alongside us having this kind of conversation, like who the care provider might be. And then we found our midwives, and it was so amazing. They're the most wonderful people on earth. And I just felt like right away, like I trusted them, and like just even the conversation with them that we were really open with initially on like, we're interviewing midwives. We're not sure if we want to do home birth or hospital and what might that look like. And they were just so generous and open with us. It really felt like there was a lot of trust there. And so I sort of right away too was like, oh, I want to work with them. I love them both. And I think that also really helped us to sort of come to the decision.
Yeah, it's always a good feeling when it just feels like the right fit.
Yeah, definitely. Their names are Tiffany and Taylor. They're twins. They're both midwives, and they run a practice together called Dose Midwifery.
Oh my gosh.
And they're just like truly magical, wonderful people. And Tiffany is a practicing nurse midwife, and she delivers in hospitals. And then Taylor is a midwife as well. And so I just felt like because of their like CNM and RN experience, I don't know, it was like, I think Casey felt a level of safety too, that they weren't opposed to a hospital setting or like that kind of care if it was needed, that they would certainly be just aware of what to look for and like just had a real level of skill. And I really, really loved and still do that, they're sisters and just this like clear, unshakable bond between them as twins and the way that they practice and the way that they care for people. They're also really caring for each other, and you can kind of see that community in their approach. And my sister is like, one of my very favorite people on earth. And she was the one other person besides Casey who was going to be at the birth. And I know I shared in Octavia's story, but she's an RN, she's a lactation consultant, and she has just been such a partner to me in like all things bringing humans into the world and raising humans. And she's an incredible mom. So I loved that parallel of like sisters and just, what it looks like to be kind of in community with your family when you're caring for little ones. So I felt like that was a good omen, and we loved the care with them right away. I want to say I transferred care shortly after the 20-week ultrasound. So it was a little more than halfway through. And, my one sort of, not regret, but I wish that I had even done it sooner because the care with them was exceptional. And it felt like everything I was sort of looking and hoping for in terms of just really walking alongside me and getting to know me and care for me and who I am in a really specific way versus just like, okay, checking out all of your physical symptoms. You look good. Okay, look for this, bye-bye, like a short kind of check-in appointment. It felt more like they were wanting to support me as a whole person, which was awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So one other thing that ended up being kind of funny enough, like really influential on me was just thinking about what I wanted for my daughter as a part of the process felt really important to me. And I wasn't sure if I wanted her to be at the birth or not. I had seen videos and heard stories of people who had siblings present and just how magical that seemed. When I was interviewing midwives and care teams, that was one of the questions that I had was, did they work okay with siblings present, or what did that look like? I just knew it was really important to me, my daughter's, what she saw of me through the process and managing change and watching our family grow and sort of the role that I took in that. And also just her care and her getting older. I felt like through the whole pregnancy, I could sort of see her shifting in my mind into this bigger kiddo. And she went from kind of a more little kiddo age, if you will, to, she turned 3 when I was pregnant. So one kind of moment that sat with me was we were at a park play date for her school that's like a real strong community that we really loved. And I was sitting and talking with another mom from the school whose kiddo was in the classroom. And she wasn't like a very close friend, but I'm so grateful for her being kind of open and honest in that conversation, because she was nursing her baby and I was sitting there pregnant. We were both watching our older kiddos play together. And she said, "Are you thinking about home birth?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness, I am thinking about home birth. How did you know?" And she said, "It was so on my mind. And I really wish I had done it with her, daughter that she now had." And she said, "I feel like a little bit I betrayed myself by not doing it because I wanted to. And now it's just like a life experience I won't have." And I felt so grateful for her being like honest and vulnerable in that moment, because I sort of realized like, yeah, that's how I think I would feel that way. I just want to do this. It's an experience I want to have. And I feel like I might feel a little betrayed if I make a different decision out of fear. So that was just one little moment, but it really stuck with me and it helped me to keep pushing for and doing the work for finding our wonderful midwives and moving into a home birth space.
Yeah, that's a cool thing to share. Okay, yeah. So I know you wanted to share too about like preparing your daughter.
Yeah, Octavia. She's so smart. She's so wonderful. She's so curious. And obviously it was just the 3 of us, my husband, me, Octavia, and our cat, Levi, can't forget about him. But, it was our little family. And I think a lot of probably parents of one who are bringing in a second, it was just so on my mind the whole pregnancy. What will this be like? How will this shift? And of course, now from the vantage point of having Everett and he's in our lives, it's like, it is exactly as everyone told me, I can't imagine our family without him. He brings so much more richness and joy, and he's just another wonderful person for us to love. And that feeling of like your heart grew, it just did. It really just did. And when I was pregnant, I didn't know that. I hadn't met him yet. And so I think I felt like a real responsibility to Octavia and my relationship with her to just really keep her front of mind as I was planning. And even, are we going to have it at home or go to a hospital? Like I was thinking about her and where would she be and who would care for her and what would make the most sense for her and what would her experience of meeting this new person be like. And so we waited quite a while to tell her we were pregnant. Definitely waited. I think I was showing. I want to say we waited until well into the 2nd trimester. And just in that first conversation, Casey and I had read a lot about kind of how to introduce it to them. And it was just so sweet. He said, "Something to tell you. And Mama is growing a baby and I have a baby in my tummy." And we knew it was a boy. At that point, I said, he's going to be just the luckiest little brother in the world because he'll have you as a big sister. And she was thrilled. So we were so lucky right away that she just really was like embracing the idea. And then we didn't make a huge deal out of it day to day. I didn't want it to feel like a big countdown or anything. But we did kind of, as it got closer, we got some books from Love Every. It's like a Montessori brand that has really nice books because they're pictures of real people. So, it wasn't like a cartoon illustration. It was pictures of people, and they have some books that are baby is coming, baby is here, and also about like, sibling relationships. And so we read those quite a bit with her, and we just talked to her about it. Anytime she wanted to talk about it, I was always really like made it a priority, but didn't push it on her. And then the one other thing we did, just like I'll talk about when they met and, when he was here and their first actual meeting, but we made sure to get a present that we said was from Everett. And like right there in the first meeting, we gave her the present and said, Everett got this for you, which, kids are so magical. It's like, how did this tiny baby get me this? But that's fine. She just accepted. She was like, great, love it. And we got her a little bike with training wheels, which she had really wanted. And so it also, in the first couple weeks, like her and Casey were out of the house a lot, learning to bike ride and going on bike rides. So it was just like a nice kind of new skill for her, and obviously like a big present. And she was so excited to get something from him. So that was a little bit about preparing her. And I think the books and like the sort of realistic, real language, Montessori style, the Love Every books were really helpful. So I'll definitely link those in the resources. The one other thing I should share about preparing, I actually tried hypnobirthing for this birth, and it was really wonderful experience. It was really helpful for us. I had tried hypno babies with Octavia for just a really short period of time, and it wasn't for me. I really didn't like it. It felt, I think, again, kind of that the thing that I didn't want was to feel checked out or like I was trying to escape from the experience. I really wanted to embrace the experience of birth and really have that experience kind of with my whole self and mindfully. So hypno babies is like listening to audio tracks, and then the hypothesis is that the more that you listen to them, you will fall into a state of hypnosis that sort of takes you out of experiencing your body or experiencing pain. So people talk about like, you can do that kind of hypnotizing for even getting dental work done. If you're allergic to anesthesia, like there's a whole practice around it. I didn't like needing to listen to things for a certain amount of time. It kind of left me feeling a lot of days like, oh, I didn't do that enough. Like it was just not for me. So one of my good friends was pregnant at the same time, and she said, how are you preparing? And I definitely felt like, knowing what I was getting into with labor, having gone through it before, I felt like I needed some tool or plan, whatever it might be, to be able to lean on during the process. Honestly, just so I had something to do. It's a fair amount of time that you're just experiencing your body and breathing, right? And so having some kind of script between Casey and I, and having something I know, like here's sort of my plan for how I'll approach this, I felt like I needed something. And so I was so excited to learn more about hypnobirthing because it really is it's a technique, and they call it self-hypnosis. But to me, I would say it felt a lot more like meditation, which is a practice I'm more familiar with than hypnosis. I'd never done hypnosis before. It honestly just felt like it's putting you in a meditative state. You're just aware of your awareness. You're relaxed and just sort of noticing where you're not relaxed and letting that be. And then there's a like specific breathing technique, which is probably common for a lot of different types of childbirth kind of prep or education, but it's like a certain count in, a certain count out. The elements of it that were specifically more maybe like aligned with hypnosis actually had to do with partner support, which I also really loved. We did it over a Zoom class, a hypnobirthing Zoom class with the wonderful women who I'll also link in the show notes. But it was like a small cohort, and we met weekly for maybe 6 weeks on Sunday for a few-hour block, the partners and the pregnant person. And some people in the cohort over the time were like, this is so awkward. I felt, we tried to do practice at home of these breathing techniques or this self-hypnosis, and they were feeling like needing to kind of break through something for it to make sense for them. I didn't feel that way at all. I loved it right away. Especially the parts where I'm kind of using air quotes, like your partner sort of hypnotizing you, which sounds odd to me, or like not what you'd want if you're really looking to be in a position of power. But again, like the way that I really thought about it was more like a guided meditation and like a shared language around relaxation. And so part of this process, the instructor, Alicia, would share scripts, and then your partner would read them to you. And so when Casey and I were going to bed and relaxing, I'm very pregnant. I have all my million pillows and it's hot over the summer. Just try to make it as relaxing as possible. And then he would read basically this guided meditation to me that was like, just so beautiful. And it had a lot of affirmations in it about the life we're creating and our baby who we're going to meet. And I never knew, give my partner a script and have him read wonderful, affirming things to me. Like it was amazing. I was like, this is so lovely. And I would fall asleep at night just hearing him, read this to me every night. And then we'd try to do a couple during the day. And yeah, it was just, honestly, it was like so lovely and relaxing. And it felt like this really nice thing we could do together. I like being read out loud too. So yeah, it just was really lovely. And there was no like scarcity trap around it. It wasn't like, oh, you need to do this for so many hours or you need to do this so many times for it to stick. It was truly just like, here's a thing you two can practice. Even if you just pick it up a few days before you go into labor, you can still resource it and access it and you lean on it when you're in labor. So that's what we did. And yeah, it worked out well for us.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we'll have to link to that. All right. So yeah, let's go ahead and hear how labor started for you.
Okay. So we were at that same park with my daughter's preschool kind of play group, and it was a beginning of the school year kind of park date. And I was just starting to feel contractions, and I felt so good. I felt really prepared. I felt at peace. We kind of had all of the million things and checklist things that I was doing for getting ready for our physical space at home. It's really not that much, but it's like you order a home birth kit, there's a tub, you have towels, whatever it is, right? I felt really like, okay, I'm ready. I have all these things. Because I sort of had just started to feel ready a few days before, I kind of felt like it would be fine if he's, a couple days late so that I have a few days of this relaxation and feeling ready. But it was great. I started to feel contractions when we were at this park date, and I was just kind of hanging out with our community who I love and, around a lot of friends. And I told Casey at one point, like, I'm really feeling contractions. And he was Bryn, he was like on it. He was like, okay, let's get you a big meal. What do you want to eat for dinner tonight? Let's go home. Let's get you hydrated. And definitely my experience with Octavia and with the birth that had been really prolonged, and, it had gone for so long. And then we had sort of found out that it was prodromal labor. It was labeled as prodromal labor. My immediate knee jerk was like, oh, we're so far away still. This isn't going to happen anytime soon. Like it's probably Braxton Hicks. And even if it's not, it's so early. Like the best thing is to ignore it. So I really wanted to stay at this play date. I like shut down the park. It was 7 p.m. or something, and it was the summer, but it was like, Casey at some point was like, okay, how far apart are your contractions? Like, we need to go home. So we did. We got enchiladas. We got like a big dinner. And I just very felt like taking it slow and not being in any kind of rush or having any expectation. I did not think that night I would be laboring all night, which I was. But I just really felt like, okay, I'm going to have a good meal and go to bed and wake up in the morning and I'll probably still be in early labor. So we did our daughter's bedtime. My husband started like moving furniture in the living room where the birth tub was going to be, rolling out, things for the birth tub. And I was like, don't, just relax, come cuddle me, don't even worry about it. We don't need to do any of that yet. And then finally he said, like, look, I'll sleep better if this is done. You just go to bed. So it was probably 10 p.m. I tried to lay down and I realized that I couldn't. I was already feeling like uncomfortable, and just when I laid down and relaxed and stopped kind of moving around the house, I could feel the contractions or, pressure waves so much more. So that was a little bit like a first clue for me of, oh, maybe this is the real thing. But I wasn't ready to accept it. So I still thought, okay, that's fine. I'm just gonna do my thing. I had a beautiful little notes app on my phone of lots of different positions. I had actually worked with a pelvic floor PT when I was pregnant, and she had done some biofeedback and did a little bit of biofeedback on how tense my muscles were in different laboring positions. And so she was able to give me, like, for me and how my muscles aligned and where my tension sort of lied. She was able to give me like, okay, early labor, you want to be in this sort of like pirate Captain Morgan stance pose. And then, middle labor, you want to help move down. And it was really helpful. So I started kind of moving through all those different spaces and ways of being. And at some point, maybe midnight or 1 a.m., my husband had finished setting up and done all the things he wanted to do. And, he's checking in on me and he was ready to go to bed. but he saw that I was just much more into labor. I wasn't timing the contractions. He started at that point, and I asked him not to share with me then, just like, I really wasn't trying to watch the clock, but he was texting the midwives, he was texting my sister, and he sort of put things into action and just made decisions, which I was really grateful for. So my sister came over, and I even at that point still was like, oh gosh, you're driving out so late. It's 1 a.m. Like, I feel so bad. You could have just waited until tomorrow morning. They were kind of letting me go along with my like, keep it cool attitude. They were like, no worries. We'll just eat breakfast together tomorrow, like as if I wasn't going to be very much laboring in the morning. They were like, it's fine. We just want to come visit. I'll just be here. So my sister was there, and that was wonderful. And then Casey and my sister Rose were kind of helping me in the shower, just like really moving through the house in different ways. I was eating snacks. I felt really good. I felt high energy. The breathing techniques that we had learned during hypnobirthing were really working for me. So basically, Casey was just keeping a steady count, 4 breaths in, 6 counts out for a breath, and it worked for me. I was just feeling relaxed and holding on to my breathing. At one point, it did seem like it was moving more toward kind of middle labor, just really progressing. My water hadn't broken or anything like that, but the contractions were coming more closely together, and I wasn't really verbal. I was just truly like in labor land and kind of swaying on the bed and like in my space. And Casey said it was time to call my parents and have them come pick up our daughter, Octavia. And that was one kind of sticking point. I had mentioned really wanting to be prepared for Octavia and what this experience would be like for her. I think I really wanted her to be there for the birth, but I also wanted to be able to play it by ear, which is not that realistic. And we hadn't prepared her to be there for the birth, and we had agreed she wouldn't be. So it didn't really make sense in that moment for me to be like, wait, let's just, she can just sleep. I think I had heard other birth stories where the older kiddo like magically woke up at the moment right before the baby came and just popped downstairs and was there. And, it was wonderful for them. And I was kind of hoping like something like that might happen. But we had agreed that she would go with my parents and they would pick her up. I think I also just felt really nervous for a moment of saying goodbye to her, or like, that I felt like I would be saying goodbye to our experience of her being our only kiddo. And so that was hard, but my husband was a rock, and so was my sister. And they were just like, no, this is going to be wonderful. She's ready. You're ready. Let's wake her up. My parents, mom and dad are on their way. They're going to get her, and it's going to be great. She's ready. She had a bag and everything. So that moment, I woke her up really gently. And because we had read all these Montessori books and they used real language, I woke her up and I said, Bubs, you're going to go with Baba and Grandma, and the baby's on its way. And she said, oh, Mama, in her like sleepy little kid voice, she said, oh, are the tight squeezes on your belly coming faster?
Oh, so cute.
I said, yeah, you know what contractions are, which was really sweet. She said, oh my goodness, I'm going to meet my brother. Like, she just had so much joy and calm, positive energy, which is, would have been fine for her to react anyway. But it was such a gift for me in that moment that she was just like really delighted and soft. And we just got to kind of snuggle on the bed for a few minutes. And I held her and I just told her everything I hoped for her and thought, and that I loved her so much. And that changes can be hard. It's change, but that like some things don't change, and it's how much we love each other and who she is to me and who she is in my heart. And that, she and I were really going on this adventure together of bringing this new life into the world who would be her little brother. And so it was very sweet. It was like a really tender moment. I definitely teared up when she got in the car and left, and I shut the door. I was just like, oh, I didn't want to say goodbye to her. And my sister was sort of like, oh no, what, why? And I just said, no, I just didn't want to, but I needed to. It was good. It was the plan. And really it was such a special moment. And I'm glad that, we weren't also caring for her during the rest of the morning when we were kind of more fully in labor and in the tub. So it went from there. So not long after that, Casey had been keeping our midwives appraised and, they said, just get as much rest as you can. It was already well into the middle of the night. And I want to say again, like contractions had really picked up for me around 10 p.m. where they were starting to feel like not comfortable to lay down. So I actually had my sister and my husband rest a little bit and try to get some rest. And I just was in the living room trying to find a position that would be like reasonably comfortable and just really focusing on my breath. And I just did it. I kind of labored through the night that way. I really wanted to lay down and sleep. I definitely had that feeling like it's the middle of the night. I want to be resting and just thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be up tomorrow. But I couldn't. It was just too uncomfortable to even lay down between the contractions. But I did end up finding a position that was comfortable enough where I was sort of on all fours over a birth ball, resting enough in between contractions. And then when the contraction happened and the wave, I just, really focused on my breathing and kind of swayed and had different ways of kind of arranging myself and supporting my belly that felt comfortable enough. When the sun rose, I knew it was like, okay, that was my second little clue of like, maybe we're doing this. I think at this point I would have said, I might actually be in labor, but I'm not sure. But I was watching the sun come up and I thought, okay, so I just did that all night, and I really felt proud of myself at that point. One, that I had done it. It felt sort of like, okay, I got through the night and I am laboring. Like that is happening, whether this baby comes in 4 or 5 more days, not that would be realistic, but just this idea of like, I'm not holding on to a specific time frame. I'm not trying to get through this. It's just what it is. And I will kind of keep like walking this path and keep being in this space until I meet Everett. Like that's it. I'm not trying to get out of it or back away from it. And I felt proud of myself for that. When the sun rose, Casey and my sister Rose got up and woke up and, made breakfast and made coffee, and the house feels different, right? It's sort of like there are these big windows in our living room. There's light coming in and music on, and the energy kind of picked up. I got back in the shower, and Casey was still in close touch with the midwives and had them come over at around 10 a.m. And he had been timing everything. And I still was saying like, well, they might come over and have to leave, but that's okay. Even if they just come over and check me and I'm not far along yet, like that's okay. But I guess if they think it's time, then yeah, let's have them come over. There was only one moment in there before the midwives came that I sort of lost my composure. I remember for one contraction, and, I had just been really feeling the way I wanted to feel. I was just really concentrating on my breath and kind of feeling this flow and this visualization and letting it happen. And then there was one point in the shower where Casey had been counting for me, and he started like chit-chatting and talking with Rose, and he had stopped the counting. And I remember I said, go back to the script. Like, wait. And I said, I lost my breath. And he said, oh, okay. Come back. Like, let's breathe. And he just really held me, and he was doing deep breaths until I could sort of like mimic that. And then we got back to the counting, and that was really helpful. But when the midwives came, I was still just doing my thing, and they just did a beautiful, wonderful job of kind of fitting seamlessly in. They didn't bring any different energy into the space or the house. They were so positive and just, here you are and you're doing it. And aside from that moment where I felt like I lost my breath, when they came, they needed to check me and see how dilated I was. And so that was sort of the second time that I felt really nervous. And it was definitely a holdover from my experience with Octavia, where I had gotten checked and had been laboring all night, all day, and was hoping I was really far along. And with Octavia, when I got checked at this sort of seminal point, I was only at 3 centimeters. And so it was called prodromal labor, and it was so crushing. And so when I needed to get checked when the midwives were there, that was definitely one moment where I felt super nervous. And, we were just on my bed in my room, and, very respectfully, she was like, okay, I really need you to focus on kind of relaxing. And I understood what she meant, because I think as she was trying to check me, she said, I couldn't really tell. It felt like it was sort of taking a long time. She said, I couldn't really tell almost if my cervix was open at all. Like she was not sure the read that she was getting. And then I felt like I made a really conscious decision to tap into everything that I needed to tap into in that moment. and sort of rely on those relaxation techniques I'd been practicing. And I really I gave this like big exhale. And my sister said she had her hands on my shoulders and she just felt my whole body like sink into the bed and just really relax. And my midwife said, "Oh, you're 6 centimeters." And I was like, okay, that's good. We're really doing this. I also sort of at that point, once everyone left the room, my husband was so happy and my sister was so happy because they had been a part of that experience with Octavia too, where I hadn't been that far along. I remember asking my sister, like, is that okay? Like 6 centimeters, I was, is it enough kind of? And she was just like, oh my gosh, you're doing it. Like, yes, this is great. You're right where you need to be. And she was so reassuring and so just really so proud and happy that it gave me, again, like that source to kind of come back to and feel proud of myself and good. And Bryn, it just went really quickly from there. We got in the tub. The midwives had helped Case to set all the water up when I wasn't paying attention. It all got filled. It all got done. It was wonderful, playing wonderful music or in the living room. And I did not have to get out of the tub again until Everett was in my arms. I had thought maybe, or just hearing birth stories or with my experience with Octavia, I thought, oh, I'm probably going to need to get checked again before I sort of get cleared to push. And there was just a lot of communication and I think a lot of intuition in reading my body and my sounds without, needing me to come out of the tub and get checked. Yeah, so I was also really happy with that because I think when I was in the birth tub and, I had started to, now I know I had started to go through transition, but at the moment, I just thought, oh, maybe I'm losing my cool or I felt and heard myself starting to get a little louder. And, it wasn't anything really dramatic, but I was just kind of having like more exaggerated sounds. And I was kind of like doing that deep breathing and fluttering my lips, like trying to stay relaxed and humming a lot. And I think I said, like, is this okay? Because I was nervous that the midwives were going to tell me like, breathe, cool down, relax, like just let your body do your thing. Sort of similar to what I had heard with Octavia's birth. And I remember Taylor, my midwife, was just like, oh yeah, like you're doing it. Like do whatever you want. Yell, like you are working on it. You're working hard. And she was basically just like, you're allowed to be and make noises and, however you want to do it that will help you move through. And at that point, I remember my sister was really sort of bracing my arms and our foreheads were together and I was squeezing her forearms. I was sort of leaning on her and Casey was in the water with me and he was kind of behind me putting pressure on my hips and my back. And my sister just said to me, she like looked at me and she said, there's no way you can squeeze me too hard. I'm here. Like kind of like let it rip. Like I am here. I'm holding you. There's nothing you can do that will like rock me or shake me. And it was just so exactly what I needed to hear. And I just felt how sincere and how true it was. Like she was holding me, like I was doing it and I was doing what I needed to do, but she could not have been more like there for me, just in every way, with all the love in her heart. So it was really special. I just remember that moment and I felt also just a lot of permission for me to be like, okay, I'm doing it. She had a little red tag on her shirt, like a Levi's tag on a denim shirt. And I just was sort of really like had this soft focus on that tag. And I just really let myself feel meditative and Casey was still counting. And yeah, at one point, my midwife said, tell me when you feel like you're ready to push. And I thought, wow, like that is so incredible that I could make that call. And at another point, I really just quieted down for a few minutes. There were no contractions and I just rested. And it was like no one disturbed me. I was at peace. And a sort of small part of my brain, I heard my sister ask either Taylor or Tiffany, one of the midwives, like, is this okay? Not, is this okay? But like, what do you think's happening? That she's just, there's no contractions and she's resting. And they said, oh, she's doing it. She's resting before she pushes. Like, this is fine. This is it. And then I think I sort of came out of that and said, like, I'm ready to push. And they were like, yeah, get it. Do it. You can do it. Like, how do you want to be? And I just started to really feel pushing him down. And I think I was saying, come on, baby. Like, we can do this. We can do this. We didn't know that his name was Everett in that moment. So I was just saying, like, we've got this. Like, we're here. And I was trying some different positions. I said, to one of the midwives. I said, I don't feel comfy. Like, this position isn't great. And she said, oh, sweetheart, Claire, like, I don't think you're going to feel comfy until you finish pushing. Like, you need to work on that. And I said, okay, like, oh, shoot, and it kind of gave, I was like, oh, I don't want to feel this way. I started to feel like, oh, this is uncomfortable. But it wasn't, obviously, it was not unbearable by any means. And yeah, and then I think really in that moment of pushing was when I was finally like, okay, I am actually having this baby right now. Like, I really needed to get all the way there to sort of believe it. And that helped me, I think, really releasing myself from an expectation of time. Is it time? Are we doing it? Kind of like, are we there yet? I just did not have that energy at all, truly, until the end when I was like, okay, this is really imminently happening. And it helped me. It helped me feel peace and settled and grounded. And like, I was there, Everett and I were doing it. And it was like how it went was how it was going to go. And yeah, so I pushed. Casey was in the tub with me, and the midwives asked him if he wanted to catch. I pushed his head. So Everett was sort of underwater in the birth tub for, a minute. And then I pushed his body. And I remember Tiffany and Taylor were right there and, had kind of a flashlight, and we're really monitoring and watching underwater and positioning him a little, and said, like, push, like, do it now, get this baby out. Not in a scary, but like really in control and giving me direction. And that was helpful. And so I did. And Casey grabbed him and brought him up to my chest. And just, there's so much relief when you go through that kind of immediate feeling of birth. It's like, it's incredible. And then such a core memory for me of Casey's hands, like really lifting Everett up to my body and my chest and just holding him so close, and his little face and his little body and how perfect he was. And my truest thought, and just like my whole brain, I thought, oh, it's like a sunrise, because they're so little and sweet and new, and they come out sort of bluish, a little bit kind of purple, not scary, not all the way, but the undertone on his skin, it was not oxygenated yet, right? He hadn't taken that breath, and then he's taking a breath, and it's suddenly this like warm, rosy glow, and I just felt like I could see nature and sunrise and like this beautiful reality of like him dawning in this way, and it was so incredible. Mm-hmm. Like, I will just never forget those colors and his skin and how perfect he was. Really, like, I just kept saying like, oh, baby, my baby. And he was so funny. Right when he was born, he was raising his eyebrows nonstop and just doing this comical little face, like, cute. His eyebrows could not stop moving. And, eyes are pretty closed and they're so sort of bundled up, and it was so beautiful. And then that was the birth. Like, that was that moment. And I felt like I didn't need to move. I felt reassured that he was healthy. I felt like I did it. I know I turned to my sister and Casey, we did it. Like, my husband was so relieved. Just poor, wonderful, sweet Casey. I sort of saw after the few days after, and he shared with me how scared he was for home birth and how much he was really just trying to follow his rational mind, that he really wanted to support me to have this experience. But like, in his soul, in his heart, he was terrified. He said it was the scariest experience he's ever had. And I felt so bad for him that we were having really opposite experiences in that moment. And also just so grateful for him to really know how to put that aside and like truly support me, and not share it with me, like, but really support me. Yeah. But the pictures of the immediate after, where he's in the tub, are almost look like a comic book drawing of someone who looks so terrified and relieved. He's like holding his forehead, and all the pictures just like, whew, like, that is done. Yeah. And just how grateful and glad that he was too, that, Everett was so healthy. And yeah. So that was the birth.
Amazing. How did postpartum go?
Immediate postpartum, and the first weeks, days, moments being at home were just everything that I could have possibly hoped for and dreamed for with this idea of having this birth at home. Like, I was at home. I was so comfortable. I was so happy. I was so delighted. I was in my favorite space with my favorite people and this new wonderful person that I got to meet and just feel like I was introducing him to our home. I felt so safe. Went to bed. I delivered the placenta. He got his vitamin K shot. Like, we did all the things that we needed to do, but it just felt very relaxed. And at the same time, I did feel very held and directed by and secure with our team and our midwife team. It was calm, but also we were doing just what we needed to do. And, I was able to nurse him. We tried to do the breast crawl with him like we had with my daughter, and he wasn't really doing it. And so I just sort of helped him get a supportive latch. And yeah, it was wonderful. My husband went and made lunch for everyone. And, at some point, a couple hours after the birth, an hour or so after the birth, I was just cradling this sweet baby in my bed, nursing him, and people were bringing me food in bed. And I was like, this is great. This is wonderful. Yeah, midwives helped me shower and get cleaned up. They cleaned up the whole house. And that experience, and also really having my sister, who is so trained and so skilled in every way, be there and be able to stay with us felt like an extra layer of really safety and care. But my husband and I slept. She held Everett. We got to wait a few days. And then I'll share about when my daughter came home and got to meet him and just how special that was. We had read for Dad to be holding the new baby when older kiddo meets baby for the first time. And so I got to kind of help my daughter come in the door and be home and give her a big hug and give her my undivided attention. And then Casey was holding Evs, and oh my gosh, just her face and her squeal and her expression. Like, she was just so happy. She held him right away. We put him on a pillow and kind of everyone, propped up around her. And she was just like, this is my brother. Like, she was so in love. And that was really, has just stuck. They have such a sweet relationship as he's one now and getting a little bigger. And, I just see more and more the way they're able to interact. Yeah. And we had, I had done a lot of body work in pregnancy, and there was a massage therapist I worked with. And I had asked her, like, once we have the baby, would you be open to coming and doing a massage at home? She was like, oh my goodness, I would love that. Because she was also a practicing doula, although obviously we had not hired her as a doula. But she came and did a massage for Casey and I both at home, like a week after he was born. And she did a sound bath, she did Reiki. It was so beautiful. And it just really felt like special and peaceful and everything I could have wanted, truly. So yeah, just hopefully affirming for anyone who's thinking about a home birth or wondering, what it might be like.
Yeah.
Does it ever live up to expectations? Like, for me in that moment, I just felt like it really, really did. It was something I'm so glad that I sort of followed my intuition or my hopes for me. And I would sort of compare it to like any challenging experience. If you said like, I want to hike Half Dome or I want to do a marathon, it's like being alive. Part of it is just saying like, I want to move through ways of being that are hard, but that are fun. And I definitely, for me, likened it to that. And yeah, I loved it so much. It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your story. And if you want to send over your resources, we'll put those on the show notes page. And then where's the best place for people to connect with you?
Thank you so much, Bryn. Instagram is a good place. My handle is private, but if you request me or message me from the birth hour, I'd always love to connect with people. And my handle is DeLeon Claire, and I'll put that in the show notes page too.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Claire. I'm glad to have you back.
Thank you, Bryn.
Now I'm going to talk to Ryan, co-founder of Needed, about their recent IRB study results and all of the great products from Needed. Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast to chat with me about Needed again.
Bryn, I'm so excited to be back.
Awesome. Well, before we get into all of the new things happening over at Needed, can you just share with my listeners a little bit about who you are and your role at Needed?
Absolutely. I'm the co-CEO and co-founder of Needed.
All right. So I recommend Needed to my listeners, my followers on Instagram all the time. I've been using the products for over a year now. And I just really love that with your perinatal products, you really go beyond the bare minimum. And it's just really important, especially for the people in my audience, because we know that during the stages of life where you're growing babies and feeding babies are especially nutritionally demanding. So I love that you guys are addressing these nutrient deficiencies and talking about now that not all prenatal vitamins are created equally. And on that note, your team just released the results of an IRB study highlighting these differences between standard prenatal vitamins versus needed. Can you just talk a little bit more about this?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited. This has been a baby of mine for a while.
Yeah.
But basically, there is overwhelming evidence that proper nutrient levels can improve fertility, birth outcomes, and the trajectory of life for both mother and baby thereafter. Yet, as we all know, despite our little kind of communities, nutrition has not been front and center in the perinatal standard of care. And most prenatals on the market provide bare minimum nutrition support. We're designing and conducting studies to add to the clinical literature to unequivocally prove that women deserve more support, resources, and radically better nutritional care. We really just fundamentally think the evidence just cannot be ignored anymore, as the lack of nutritional support is really failing women and children. So our goal for this study specifically was to take a more comprehensive look at nutritional status in pregnancy. The study compared nutritional characteristics between women taking the needed prenatal multi and a standard prenatal vitamin.
Okay.
We collected survey data and analyzed nutrient biomarkers, so nutrient levels actually in the blood themselves, in a diverse group of 235 adult pregnant women across 7 U.S. states. And what's really exciting and what you're hinting towards is that the results actually revealed quite striking insights into how maternal nutrition status differs by the type of prenatal vitamin a woman is taking during pregnancy. Specifically, we found that women taking the needed prenatal multi had higher blood levels of key nutrients for pregnancy, including vitamin D, B6, selenium, and zinc, among a number of others. When we compared prenatal subgroups, we found that only the group of women taking the needed multi had sufficient blood levels of vitamin D and vitamin B6 compared to the group taking the standard prenatal. And nutrients like vitamin D and B6 play key roles in pregnancy and supporting both maternal and baby health outcomes. So it's really exciting. And it's also important to reiterate that our study was diverse and the prenatal groups were comparable on several key factors outside of their prenatal vitamins. This is really important for the rigor of the study. So for example, 1/3 of the women in each group identified as a race ethnicity other than white, and women in both groups were in similar stages of their pregnancy.
Okay, and what does the IRB part mean?
The IRB is the Institutional Review Board, and they're basically a committee that reviews clinical research involving human subjects to ensure that certain ethical standards are met.
Okay. It's super important when studying pregnant women.
Super important when studying pregnant women, and in terms of showing proper kind of rigor and study design went into the methodology of how we conducted the research as well.
Right. So one thing that I thought was interesting is that a lot of this past studies weren't even done on pregnant women or even women. Oftentimes it was like based on white men as far as vitamin levels and things like that. So as you mentioned, these are really striking results. And what does this really mean for women in the trying to conceive or pregnancy or postpartum season of life? Like, what should we be taking away from this data?
You're right that sort of there is a lot of missing gaps in the research, though we also have found that there is a lot of really good research emphasizing the need for better nutrition at this stage of life. But overall, we see this study as adding to the growing body of evidence showing that, one, meeting nutritional needs through diet alone is very challenging in modern context. So supplementation is needed. 2, that most pregnant women in the US fail to meet dietary recommendations for certain key nutrients that are very important for pregnancy, like vitamin D. And 3rd, I think increased evidence that standard prenatals are really falling short in closing the gap between nutritional needs and dietary intake. And overall, we hope this study leads to more clinicians and moms advocating for the nutrition that is needed for a healthy pregnancy.
Yeah, and I've been sharing about this with my followers on Instagram from some of the data you guys are talking about. And one thing I thought was really interesting was the statistic about how few care providers are discussing nutrition with pregnant and postpartum women at all.
Yeah, that is absolutely striking. We found that nearly 80% of women reported receiving little to no nutritional advice from their OBGYN during their pregnancy care.
Yeah, and this is something that comes up on the podcast a lot because I feel like people really notice a difference when they have midwifery care versus OBGYNs because nutrition is something that's talked about in these much longer prenatal appointments and things like that. So yeah, it's a big part of feeling good throughout pregnancy. And I know that one thing that Needed really focuses on as well is that it's not just during pregnancy, but also postpartum. So can you talk a little bit about that as well?
We equate it in a lot of ways to nutritional depletion, and that a lot of the importance for this life stage is in avoiding depletion. So meaning when your body lacks the essential vitamins, minerals, or other nutrients that are really needed for optimal function. And depletion is not something that occurs only through pregnancy, but women are more vulnerable in critical life stages such as pregnancy and breastfeeding. So that postpartum stage that you mentioned right there. And a lot of the problem is that women go into pregnancy already depleted and then increase their depletion in growing baby, so end up in a pretty tough spot postpartum. Mm-hmm. There are many contributors to this depletion, from nutrient deficient soil and stress. And then the signs of depletion like brittle nails, fatigue, headaches, mood changes, thinning hair, constipation, dry skin, all sound pretty familiar to us, right? Mm-hmm. And really research suggests that up to 95% of women experience nutritional depletion even when they are on a prenatal vitamin.
Oh my gosh.
Depletion is, I think, a much bigger problem than we actually, have historically given it credit. And a lot of us, women just assume we have to feel these things, these signs of depletion, just as part of our, that's just the status quo. That's how it's supposed to be. And I think a lot of our sort of emphasis is showing that no, radically better is possible. There are ways to better support ourselves through nutrition to minimize those signs of depletion.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to someone recording their birth story, and they were saying how, they were super focused on their nutrition during pregnancy, and then it kind of fell to the wayside postpartum. And it's like especially if you're breastfeeding, it's taking a lot of energy and nutrients, and then you're also sleep deprived because you have a new baby. So the depletion, I think, like you mentioned, is just something we really need to focus on beyond pregnancy.
Yeah, and most care providers aren't really reminding folks. They think of it as like a prenatal, not a perinatal.
Right.
There are some postnatals that exist, but I think the use of them in that breastfeeding life stage that is actually more nutritionally intensive than pregnancy is a non-supported part of this life stage. And, where we see so many women really talking about that postpartum period being the most difficult. And I think being able to advocate and raise awareness to better support and how do we care for mom, not just care for baby during that stage is very important.
Yes, I'm just nodding along to everything over here. So are there any other supplements that women should consider outside of a prenatal to help fight depletion?
Absolutely. So most prenatals and aren't included are vitamin and mineral blends. And there are many other nutrients that are supportive of combating nutrition. Unfortunately, we just don't think that there's a single product that can fully get you over the hill on depletion lack. So it needed what we are really focused on rather than just a single product that we do hero our prenatal multi a lot, but really an emphasis on a system of products is most supportive. And for example, we do offer an omega-3 DHA EPA add-on. So DHA omega is often something that you probably do hear as part of taking that alongside your prenatal. And DHA and EPA are very supportive of a healthy pregnancy. Sometimes they are combined with a prenatal multi, but we often see that can lead to kind of lack of nutrient integrity or too low of doses. So we do think it is important to offer it as a separate product for that reason, but do advocate for that being added on to your system of products. And then there's a whole host of other products depending on needs. I personally really love our sleep support, as lack of sleep is a big contributor to depletion. And I also really love our breastfeeding safe cognitive support product. It's a product that really helps me sort of feel like me and try to do it all by being a working mom while still, breastfeeding and chasing after my kids. Being able to focus when I need to focus is a critical part of that.
Yes, I'm a huge fan of that one as well. So you guys offer several bundles and things like that with these add-ons. Where's the best place for people to start if they're trying to decide what's right for them?
Our website does help to guide you by sort of life stage or need, which is thisisneeded.com, or we're at Needed on Instagram. And we actually have a team of trained nutritionists and doulas as part of our customer support team. So they're eager and ready to help if you do want to sort of DM us or email us if you kind of get stuck on the website your own. So that's a great place to start. And then I'd also really recommend folks to go to thisisneeded.com/thrive to learn more about the prenatal study and the rigor that went into it, and a lot more results beyond what we're able to share today.
Yes, it's so fascinating. And I'm the same way. Like, I can't squeeze it all in to share on Instagram either. And so I'm like, please go check it out, because it really is amazing what you guys were able to find out from this study. And I love that people are available in the DMs to help guide, because I feel like it can be really overwhelming when choosing your prenatal. And starting with the main prenatal is obviously a great choice, but I know lots of people want to take advantage of these bundles too. So that's great to know that it's available to DM or email.
Yeah, I think we're here to help, and it's really a passion of a lot of members of the team to do so. So we're excited to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for chatting with me about all of this. It's always great to hear what you guys are up to, and I'm always happy to share with my listeners about Needed.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much again to Claire for sharing her birth story with us, and to Needed for sponsoring this episode. Don't forget, you can use the coupon code BIRTHHOUR at thisisneeded.com to save up to 40% off those bundles on your first order. And if you want more information from today's episode, including a link to Claire's first Birth Hour episode, you can go to thebirthhour.com and just search for her name to find her show notes page. And I will link to those things in the podcast app where you're listening to this episode as well.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.